America's economy might not recover very fast. For many economists, particularly those who belong to the American Economic Association, the new year began on a gloomy note. At the organization's annual meeting at the start of January, many economists predicted the nation's gross domestic product would grow by less than 2% a year during the upcoming decade. Historically, that would be quite a letdown, because since World War II, most steep downturns have been followed by strong recoveries. Based on historical patterns during post-war periods, growth should be more like 6% when recovering from a deep recession like the one we've just been through, says Robert Johnson, the Associate Director of Economic Analysis at Morningstar, predicting that recovery from this recession is unlikely to follow the sharp V-shaped pattern many economists were expecting. And Johnson is not alone. I hate to say this time is different, but I think it may be. With overhanging debt at the household and national levels and a serious trade imbalance, it will be very difficult to return to the stronger growth patterns of the post-war years. So if this time really is different, what's the difference? Economists say there are near-term factors related to the recent downturn, as well as longer-term changes in the makeup of the economy that could very well lead to a decade of slow growth. There are 5 areas weighing down projections for the next 10 years. 1. Commercial real estate. Members of the Federal Reserve Board have cited commercial real estate as a near-term concern for the strength of the recovery. Weakness in this sector will be a significant drag on gross domestic product for the fourth quarter of 2009, the first quarter of 2010, and possibly beyond, as construction continues to contract and lenders are forced to take further write-downs. Because commercial real estate loans are typically held by smaller regional banks, the sector doesn't pose the same systemic threat that the troubled residential real estate did. Small banks can and do fail without threatening the health of the economy. Commercial real estate is also typically a lagging indicator, so continued weakness in this sector doesn't necessarily undermine the case that some recovery is underway. 2. Business spending. Businesses' access to credit, and thus their ability to make new investments, will remain constrained for some time. With the government borrowing so much to finance the bailouts and economic stimulus, there's less capital available for the private sector to borrow. Businesses are likely to remain cautious about hiring workers. Demographic changes. An aging population means a labor force that grows more slowly than it did for much of the post-World War II period. A resulting younger workforce is typically less productive than an older workforce. The number of people in their peak spending years will also start to decline as baby boomers age. The shift to an older population has longer-term implications beyond just the next decade as baby boomers retire in great numbers. Long-term, the worry is we have a society where the elderly soak up public funds at the expense of education and the young. Over the next generation, a lack of funding for education could lead to a mismatch between the workforce we need and the workforce we're creating. 4. Slower productivity growth. With the labor force growing slowly, economic growth will have to be driven largely by gains in productivity. Higher taxes and increased regulation could put a serious damper on innovation and slow productivity growth. Over the past 15 years, increased international trade has led to increased efficiencies, but we're unlikely to see the same kind of growth in trade in the next 15 years. Technological breakthroughs that could significantly increase productivity are difficult to predict. However, innovations often come from the kind of smaller, risk-taking companies that are having particular trouble accessing credit right now. And 5, changing spending habits. If American consumers make permanent changes in their spending habits as a result of the recession, growth could be restrained for a generation. However, the fear of a newly restrained American shopper could be overdone. If people have houses, if they have jobs, they have ways of life, and somehow they're going to try to get back to them. But the problem with all this is that the more jobs that you lose in the U.S. economy, the harder it will be for there to be a real economic recovery. Because you can't have job destruction and a real economic recovery at the same time. You must have job creation. And yes, these are times like never seen before and will never be seen again. There is something much more going on here. Something much bigger than all this. And these are more signs of the end times transition days. There is a great transition going on, not only in this country, but all around the world. The system of things must change. It must change for the better, rapidly. And there are all kinds of signs happening daily.